meeting group for people that couldn't make it this evening. And then I'm going to share my screen with you. Fingers crossed for technology today. Right, here we go. Yeah, I do like a nice PowerPoint. So, communicating with difficult people, as I said, it's something that happens all to us at different times. And what we mean by difficult people does vary definitely in terms of what you find difficult in terms of personality or behaviours. And obviously the way you react will determine how the relationship goes forward. But it can have a real effect on you in terms of your mental well-being, in terms of your stress levels, your enjoyment of the job even. You know, if you're working with difficult people, that can mean that it affects your productivity and, just as I say, enjoyment at work, even leaving a job when you work with somebody like that. So I'm going to start by talking about people that you don't get on with, you dislike. And then I'm going to move on to manipulative people. Now, it's highly likely that most people fall into both groups, but I thought we'd start with talking about people that we find difficult, maybe we don't get on with their personality. And I do remember working with, in my corporate career before I started coaching business, working with a particular man. I was brought into the new team. He'd been there quite a long time, older than me, you know, set in his ways. And right from the first minute in the first meeting with him, I knew it was going to be difficult because he would do sarcastic comments. He was quite unhelpful towards me. I would ask questions and he maybe wouldn't even bother to answer them. And I noticed that although he was particularly good about talking his own game, he rarely picked up on any of the sort of team actions to deliver on, which was incredibly frustrating. And looking back, at the time I used an avoidance technique to try and get on with him, basically spending as little time as possible in his company. But looking back now, I suppose that maybe not been the best approach. I think rather than doing that, I would need to take some responsibility for my part of the working relationship. If it's not working, that's two people, not just one. And I chose to blame him entirely. But looking back now, I would probably start off by trying to get to know him better, to feel like I understand where he's coming from and why his behaviours are like that. And if that didn't work, I'd probably end up having an open and quite an honest conversation with him. So the way that we behave with people will affect their behaviour back. As I said, we can't change people, but we can change our behaviours and then hopefully drive a change of behaviour in others. So that was my first experience of somebody who was very difficult to work with. Is anybody had a thought on their pre-work about particular characters that they found it difficult to work with? Happy to share?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. In my current company, our IT manager is quite a difficult person.
Right.
I'd say his personality is quite, he's quite direct. He usually tries to sort of use technology and technical terms to kind of undermine or make you feel stupid or make other people think that he's kind of the authority in the room.
Right.
So yeah, he's an interesting character.
Okay, so how do you deal with him at the moment?
So yeah, a number of different ways really. I usually end up, it's quite frustrating because I was thinking about this beforehand, I usually end up having to do quite a bit of extra work around projects because a lot of my day job is projects that involve an IT element or an angle. So he's involved in pretty much everything that I do in some shape or form. So getting his buy-in and other people just know it. Oh, well, is Andrew okay with that? Have you checked this with Andrew? When he doesn't have any idea on what's good or not. In one of the areas I'm looking at is a new intranet for the company, and because he's IT, people say, oh, you know, have you checked with Andrew? But he actually hasn't got any real experience in intranet. So
Right.
yeah, just having to preempt kind of what his angle might be, where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, and I think one of the things you're highlighting there, it sounds like he's not only difficult with you, he's difficult with everybody, which is why they want
Yeah.
to check in with him first. And we can create people like that. We can create people that, oh, they're the tricky one, you better run it past them. But in actual fact, that is just reinforcing the behaviour.
I find it quite frustrating actually, and it's one of the things that I mean, we can talk about it separately if it's not for this call, but I find it really frustrating that lots of people within the company, he's been around for a very long time, probably almost since it was founded, and lots of people just kind of dismiss his behaviour as oh, that's just Andrew, that's okay. So it just reinforces it, and that's probably harder to deal with than his actual behaviour.
Yes, absolutely. Good point. Yeah, thanks, Miranda. Anybody else got any particular examples they'd like to share?
I've worked with quite a few different international distributors in about 18 different countries, and I'm not sexist in any way. I actually get on better with men generally in sort of a working environment, but one particular international distributor always says things like, I don't understand, and he clearly does, because everybody else understands it and their English is very good.
Yes.
And quite frankly, he can't deal very well with somebody that actually looks younger than they actually are, which is myself. And actually I'm female in a different country, so they use the I do not understand comment quite a lot. But so I make sure that I back up a conversation with an email that includes everybody. So if we're having a group team, I will do that. Obviously, if it's a one-to-one conversation, whether it be on Microsoft Teams or on the telephone, I will always try and put an email together, just confirming it. And that's really helped me a lot. Although it takes a couple of minutes to write that email, but a couple of minutes counts up for a lot, and it's also peace of mind for me.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's finding what works for you in those situations. Hi, Helen. Hi. Good to see you here. You're on my island holiday now. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back to the presentation. We can talk some more in a minute about your experiences as well. Where have I gone? There I am. Okay. So we were just talking about experiences, Helen, of what it's like to work with difficult people. So I just want to talk about some different ways in which you can start to think about working with somebody that you basically don't get on with, whether it's a clash of personalities or whatever the reason is for it. So the first thing to do is about identifying situations. So when is it that you find it really difficult to work with somebody particularly? Is there a situation in which their behaviour really you find difficult? Is it in a meeting? Is it in a one-to-one? Is it on a presentation? When actually are you finding that you're having that clash internally or externally with the other person? So once you can start to learn the triggers and when they happen, it then starts to give you the power to be able to do something about it. So when does it happen? And then analyze, why is it happening? What is it about their specific behaviours? And you do need to be very specific here, not just, well, I don't like it or it annoys me. What is it specifically that is upsetting you? And think about why that does upset you. Because there can be a number of different reasons why it happens. It could be that their behaviour annoys you because it's something that you do and you don't like it about yourself. So that can be quite sort of subconscious. It's triggering something in you that makes you think, ooh, because you don't like that behaviour. And you know that you do it at times. Or it could be that it reminds you of somebody else that shows that behaviour, not necessarily in work. It could be somebody you've worked with in the past. You didn't get on with them and they particularly did this behaviour. But that doesn't mean they're the same person. So thinking about, is that a fair judgment on this person just because they have a behaviour that is like somebody else that you know? And the other one is, does their approach just clash with your personality? If they're a hugely alpha person, determined, out there, decisive, fast-paced, on the border of aggressive, does that clash with your more reflective, introverted, analytical type personality? Because we're not going to get on with everybody. But once you can start to determine what it is that is really affecting you, what it is that's triggering those sorts of feelings of, you know, clash of personality or really annoyed at this person. And another good way of understanding for yourself is to look around you, to observe, how are other people reacting to this person? Is it something that's about you specifically, or do you notice it with other people? So, you know, observe outside of yourself, see whether you can tell whether other people are behaving in the same way. The third one to do, which is pretty tricky at times if you really don't get on with somebody, is to be empathetic. And I would say probably all of you on this call are empathetic people, but it can be quite tricky to do when you're not, you don't feel connected to the person, or you're annoyed by the person. But first of all, think about, you know, what positive traits do they have? Are there elements about their personality that you enjoy working with? Are there elements about their personality that make work a bit easier when they're not showing the more annoying personalities? Have a think about what's going on for them personally, what's going on for them at work, and what is it that is causing them to behave in this way. You might never know, but it's helpful to put your empathetic head on and just to think, okay, what could be happening here? Now, that doesn't mean that you let them get away with behaviours that aren't appropriate or acceptable. That just means, can you see it from their perspective as well? I know somebody we've talked to, one of the clients I talked to about this earlier this week was saying they had a colleague who just doesn't speak to them at all. You know, sits in the office but doesn't speak. Now, what could be going on with a person that doesn't want to connect and doesn't want to involve? So you could try with your empathetic head on to think what is going on with this person, but you may not be able to discover it. But starting with being empathetic, first of all, is going to put you in a more positive place to be able to work with that person. And do suspend your judgment that you have on people until you get to know them better. So, for example, the guy that I had an issue with when I moved into that team for the first time just assumed, because I was younger and coming in with new ideas, that I wouldn't be somebody that they would want to connect with. I was going to be difficult. So their judgment was made very much straight away by him on me. And I think if we give ourselves time to judge without being taken in by those very first sort of impressions that we get on somebody's personality. So being empathetic is very important, but as I say, it doesn't mean you have to accept their behaviour. There are other things you can then do. So obviously the obvious one to you probably is to talk it out, to have that discussion with somebody. And before you decide to do that, you're obviously going to have to think over a few things. First of all, you're clearly not going to walk in and say, I dislike you, how are we going to work together? Because that's not going to be progressive. So what you need to do is determine, first of all, will a direct and honest conversation with this person help your work relationship? It's that balance of, is it going to be of benefit to both of us if we have this conversation, or is the risk a risk with this type of personality that it might all backfire? Now, the easy thing to do here is to say, oh, well, it might go wrong, I think I'll leave it. So don't use it as a way out of having a conversation. But you could talk to other people, your manager or somebody else that works with him, to understand how this other person, male or female, might react, and how you can have that conversation. And talking it out, we'll discuss a bit more, but it really is about using all of your assertive skills that we talk about on the programme. So it's very much listening first and speaking second. So if I go into that a bit more then, if you were wanting to have a conversation with somebody that was open and honest about how things weren't working in your working relationship, you would be assertive, but how else might you introduce that sort of conversation? Has anybody ever had an open and honest conversation with somebody they find it difficult to work with?
Hi Joe, it's Harj here. Yes, I think I kind of spoke to you about some of the conversations I've had, and with difficult people, difficult personalities, and I think it was what you said, which is, I know you're going to probably talk a little bit about next, is about taking the emotion out of it. And really that made the difference, you know, not pointing to you. It was almost like, this made me feel by you not including me in, or you not talking to me, or you not whatever, you know, it was almost helped that relationship out, which was really worthwhile for me. And I think, and since I've done that, our partnership working is changing. So we're having regular 2 weekly conversations, which I never thought I'd ever get to. So it's really, really helping and supporting that. So this will only enhance it. So, you know, to take it that little bit further, because he's still difficult in different ways, and I still come across against clashes with him about certain things that we talk about. And so it's just managing that a little bit better. But all the stuff that you gave from before has really helped. Yeah,
great. Would you be happy to share just that bit of the conversation you had about walking into the room?
Yes, yes, it was with a peer, so in the leadership team, who talked to 2 other people within the room. So he'll go and talk to the direct manager and another person, and totally ignored that I was even there for a whole hour. I could be sitting there, and he hadn't even acknowledged, said hello, even discussed anything with me. It was like as though I was invisible, and it wasn't a nice place to be. And, you know, and then it didn't happen once, it happened at every meeting, you know, and it would become to a point where I was dreading going in, you know, or I delay myself from going in earlier, because if that was to happen, it just made me feel worse. So, you know, by having that conversation with him, you know, he actually said, I'm really sorry, I didn't realise I was doing that, and there was no intent behind it. The reason why I do that is for this and this and this. And it made me really understand. And you said a bit like walking in his shoes and understanding where he comes from. He has severe anxiety when meetings start, so he just automatically gravitates towards certain people. And that I kind of got then in the end, because I didn't take it personal anymore. But I think obviously now we can't test that out with COVID situation. But now, even in virtual meetings, I feel he's been a bit more noticing and saying things to me, which, you know, I feel a bit more like I'm there now. He understands that, and he's been a bit more open and honest about it as well, and he's been a bit more conscious about it too, which has helped.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a great example, Harj. Thank you for sharing, because you know, what was going on in his head was totally different to what was going on in Harj's head, and that could have been a really damaging relationship if it had continued like that. And he was actually didn't realise what you were thinking at all, Harj, did he? He was just oblivious to that. It was in his own anxiety issues. So that's why opening and having a conversation can sometimes be really powerful and have really effective results. And it's about acknowledging the kind of tension that might be going on between you, or asking at the front of the conversation, you know, I'd like us to talk openly and honestly about how we're going to work together in the future. Opening it up honestly like that is so much easier then if the other person buys in, because you're both coming from a similar place, rather than just going straight into, I don't like it when you do this. So it's setting the contract, setting the ground rules of the conversation first that's important. And then you need to sort of give an outline as to the behaviours or the situations that you find difficult. So if we say, use Harge as an example, so I walk into meetings and you and the other directors are there and you never speak to me. So that's a very specific situation you're describing there. And that's what you need to do, is to be very specific with the behaviours you're bringing up. It's no good saying, I don't think we get on, or I don't think you like me, or there's tension between us. You need to be quite specific. But you also then can't come up with a great big shopping list of things that you find very difficult about the person. There needs to be some positivity in there. So it's good as well to have in things where I found it really helpful when you did this. I really enjoyed working with you on this project. So be honest and open, but recognize the positives as well as talking about the things that are causing you tension. And as with all assertiveness, it's very much about those I statements. Not you, but I. I find it really difficult, or find it really upsetting when I enter a room and you're not able to say hello to me. I. Yes, there's a you in there, but I find it. I feel upset. I was surprised. Yeah, it's very much using your I statements. And then a good one at the end, when you've talked about some of the positives and you talked about a couple of specific behaviours you found difficult, is to then ask, okay, what can we do differently to ensure that our relationship continues to work really well? Yeah. So that is the sort of way you would have that open, talk it out approach. Now, I totally get that that's not going to work with everybody, but it can be a starting point. And it may be that you have to keep regularly meeting to have those discussions. And there will be some people that don't deal with it well. And if you get into a form of confrontation, then, you know, I can talk you through how you could deal with that confrontation. But if somebody is getting upset or angry, then it's most appropriate to leave the conversation there, put a stop at it. Yeah. Okay, so that's number 4, talk it out, probably the biggest one that's most difficult to do. Managing your emotions is very important. When we're annoyed, frustrated, angry with somebody, we react. And our response is very much fight or flight, and quite often fight. So if you react immediately to somebody's behaviour, you will be in that fight, flight, or freeze, and your reaction is not going to be the best response that you could give. So at least give it the sort of second or so for your emotions to calm and for you to come talking from that more logical part of your brain rather than the part of your brain. Because that just allows that bit of brain to catch up and to allow you to respond. So a deep breath, a sip of water, anything to allow that moment to go down and manage your emotions. And the biggest thing is about taking you personally out of it. It's very rarely about you. It's almost always about them. Yeah. Sound like I'm breaking up a relationship, but it is almost always what is going on in their head that's happening for them, the way they're perceiving the world, the way they're perceiving you and work. So Justin Harge's example, where he was perceiving or was anxious and he was going to somewhere that felt safe and secure, Harge had no idea what he was perceiving at that time. So if you don't do this talking out, you might never get past that. So take yourself personally out of it. It's about the work, it's about the situation, it's not necessarily about you. And finally, to avoid being negative with other people. When somebody behaves in a bad way, particularly in a large office area or something like that, there is the tendency to go off and moan to everybody. And the problem with that is you spread the negativity, it can get back to the person, it reinforces behaviours, and it doesn't do respect for you any good either. So you may have one person that you can share with, you may have a conversation with people about how they find working with a certain person, but don't go in there with all negative flags flying, it's only going to make things worse for you and the other person. So that tendency to offload on people, just be careful to who and how you say it. Okay. The other thing to be aware of with speaking up to people that you really don't get on with is around the hierarchy structure. Obviously, if it is somebody who works for you, that is one thing in which you're going to have to go into feedback and coaching rather than an honest talk about it type approach. Let's talk about how we both feel. If you are managing somebody, you obviously want them to recognize and realize the behaviors and the effect those behaviors are having on other people. So that would be about coaching to start with, and if that made no difference, then it would then be about giving feedback and performance, etc. If it's an upwards issue that you don't get on with somebody, then that's going to require quite a bit of preparation. I would again find a mentor or a support or somebody within the business that you can talk to it about it to safely and confidently before you approach that, because obviously it's going to be quite a big issue depending on the type of person that your manager is, but you would need some support, somebody to talk over that with first, I think, before you approach that. Okay, so that's the blurb on working with people you just don't get on with. Do we have anybody who's happy to share any experiences when they've used any of this and it worked or it didn't work, or any experiences at all, really? I'll stop sharing this. Oh.
Hey Joe, it's Rachel.
Hi.
Hey, yeah, so we use the SBI technique, situation, behaviour, impact, as you're quite rightly talking from the I and not the you. I mean, we touched on this on our coaching session earlier this week. There was one individual that he was a Russian national, so there was actually a cultural clash in terms of our view of the world in a work context, and it took us quite some time to understand each other's perspectives, I guess, but we use the SBI for me to give feedback to him in terms of how his behaviours sort of had an impact on me and therefore the reaction in me and vice versa, and it actually came to a really positive place for us both. So we used it to broker the conversation in a structured, non-emotional way to get the topic on the table, use that as a vehicle to find a new way of working, but then agreed that we would continue to use the SBI to reinforce positive behaviours as well as behaviours that needed addressing. So it became our common language and it got easier. And now it's just commonplace for us in terms of, if something's working or not working, we kind of call it out. So it can be a really simple but powerful tool.
Yeah. And is that something that's used in your company or something you brought with you?
It is. I'm used to it from other leadership courses, but we use it in Johnson Matthey all the time. So it's part of our leadership development language.
Yeah. Is everybody comfortable with what that means? Situation, behaviour, impact. Yeah. So basically it's about talking about the situation and what's happened. It's almost like assertiveness, actually, isn't it? So talking about the situation, then talking about behaviour using I, and then the impact that it's having on yourself or on other people. Yeah. So that's a good one, Rachel. Thank you. I was hoping you'd speak up about him. Excellent. Good. Anybody else got anything to share?
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Purabi here. So I recently have had a bit of a difficult time with a sort of a business partner in another team. He has also got other people annoyed. He's made cataclysmic errors left, right and centre, and he kind of approached me to have a way of working talk after we did have a few run-ins. So I was actually on the receiving end of which was good. I mean, I welcome that. I always welcome feedback, but it was really difficult because he spent the entire time really moaning and not really having any examples, not really being a completely distorted view of the situation at hand. And so I think in the session I kind of had prepared quite a lot before, and I sort of went through some examples, not all of them. And really what I wanted to say to him is, I can't stand you and I hate working with you, but obviously I can't do that in a workplace. And you know, I had to, you know, be really professional and so forth. And so I prepared in that way, where I prepared the areas that we were having particular difficulty with. I prepared constructive ways of working. I try to be positive and empathetic and all the things that you mentioned. But I actually came away from that meeting feeling totally exhausted. He didn't want to be constructive. He just wanted to rant. Nothing, anything that he said made no sense. So we ended up going, let's have a meeting, let's see how it goes. And I now dread our fortnightly catch up. If I could make it a yearly catch up, I would prefer that. And I absolutely dread it, because he just we never just goes round in circles. And what he does is he puts a lot of the blame on me, and then completely, so he'll undermine me, he'll go to my boss, I'll find out things that he should have come to me about, and he'll just I find out through other people. So he kind of you know, he expects something from me, and then he does exactly the same, like, well, does worse, and I find that incredibly difficult.
Okay. So you've tried the empathy bit. Have you tried a coaching approach at all?
Oh yes, I have tried that now, and that seems to be working, because I don't think he feels threatened as much, which I think has helped a little bit. But I still find working with him particularly challenging, and I don't usually find people that challenging, but he's probably been my most challenging.
He sounds like he lacks a lot of self-awareness, so telling somebody like they'd behave a different way when they're like that, lacking that self-awareness, is going to be pretty tricky. So that's where the coaching bit works, because you're drawing it out of him for him to recognize it, but it's not going to be an overnight process.
No. No, I need a strong coffee before any of those calls.
Okay, brilliant. Right, let's move on to some manipulators. Who doesn't need a manipulator in their life?
Absolutely.
So as I said before, these people clearly fall into the bracket of people you don't get on with as well, usually, although they may sometimes go unnoticed. So what I mean by a manipulative person is somebody that gets you to do something that you maybe didn't want to, or to not do something. They're basically influencing you. But the difference between influence and manipulation is the manipulating person is doing it all for their best interests. So it's all about what I want, nothing about you. Whereas generally when we influence people, it's for the best of the company, the best of the projects, the best of our working relationship. It's got some pluses on either side, but a manipulative person, there won't be any pluses at all. So just to give you an idea about a type of manipulative person, because sometimes they're quite difficult to spot. So I'm just going to talk you through an example I've got that is quite blatantly manipulation, but it shows a lot of different types. So I thought it was quite helpful. So just imagine this scenario. It's the end of a hard-working week, and Asha can't wait to get home to spend the evening with her family. But her boss, Karen, walks into the office, sits down and sighs. Today went really fast, Karen says. My mother just got into town, and it looks like I'll have to work late this evening on the quarterly report. It's a real shame, because I've booked dinner at a restaurant and I hardly ever get to see her. That's a shame, says Asha, and she's starting to feel quite uncomfortable at this point. And then Karen says, the last time you handled the quarterly report, you did a really good job and got it done in just a few hours. And then she says, she leans in closer to Asha and says, oh, and while I'm here, I wanted to mention that I'm speaking to HR next week about whether you should get a pay rise. So hopefully within that, you can see there's a number of manipulative behaviours. From the outside, it might appear that actually what Karen has said is absolutely fine. But when we look at it in a bit more depth at the exact behaviours you get. So she started off with, today's gone really fast, and my mum's just got into town, but it looks like I'll have to work late on the report. There she's going for the sympathy and the sort of playing the victim. Poor me, feel sorry for me, etc. She then says, it's a real shame because I booked dinner and we don't get much time together. We're now moving into guilt tripping. So you don't realise my mother's never here and now I've got to do this report. Oh, it's just not fair. Then she goes into a bit of flattery. Last time you did this report, you did it really quickly in just a few hours. And finally, we end up with a bit of bribery and reward, which is, oh, by the way, next week I'm talking to HR about a pay rise. And immediately then Asha says, okay, I guess I could do the report for you. So do you see the types of manipulative behaviour going on there? Yeah. And done in a group together like that, it feels manipulative. But imagine if they just use one or two of these at a time and they did it over a long period of time. It can be really powerful in terms of manipulating you to do something. So bribery and rewards is obviously what I talked about there, that they may hang a pay rise over you or the opportunity to work on the project, different project, or something out there as a way of getting you to do what they want. Threats and challenges is obviously, well, if this doesn't get done, this will happen, and what about your job, and what about this? The guilt tripping bit, which is one that always gets me, which is about, oh, it's just not fair, you're all right, you've got this, but I haven't. There's the flattery bit, and that particularly happens when a new person joins an organisation or a team. If there's a manipulator in there, they will probably become your best buddy for a short period of time, just to almost groom you into being somebody that wants to reciprocate. And a lot of these behaviours are based on that reciprocity type rule, in that human beings have this need to reciprocate when something good is done for them. So a lot of manipulation is like that. Then there's the lying, the hiding the truth, and when they are challenged, they'll completely deny it or have some big excuse for it. Or you may recognise in people the playing the victim type of role. So those are the type of behaviours to look out for. So how do you deal with somebody that manipulates? Well, oh, my Diet Coke is always there. So rather than write it, I thought we'd have some pictures. So the first thing to do in terms of finding a manipulator is to look for their manipulation characteristics. So yes, you'd look at what I talked about there in terms of the way they're trying to manipulate them, but there are also some personality characteristics to look out for. As somebody who's a manipulator will want to have everything their way all of the time. So I know quite a few people like that, and they don't take no for an answer. Those are the type of behaviours. They're the sort of person that is at all costs, so they'll succeed whatever it takes. They'll make excuses for hurtful behaviour. Well, that wasn't my fault, or you're just being sensitive. Those sorts of things. And finally, they'll frequently make you feel guilty. They'll put things in a way that make you think it was your fault, or if you'd done something different, it would have been all right. Oh, and also, don't forget the people who have different faces. So people who have a face for one type of person and a different face for another. I think you probably know people like that. And they will change their face according to the purpose or the need of the session of the person they're talking to. So that's with the manipulative behaviours and the types of personality together, hopefully that will give you some ideas of what a manipulator might look like and whether you know anybody particularly. Do bear in mind that some people don't recognise they're doing it. So pointing out behaviours to people can be helpful, because a lot of people will not actually, a few people will not recognise that they're deliberately doing that. So how do you respond to them? Well, the first, as I said previously, is about being assertive. So passive, you give in and you're manipulated. Aggressive, you go over the top, they'll deny having done anything wrong, and you'll be left looking like the guilty one. So be assertive. Again, talk about the specific behaviours involved. Talk about specific situations. Use an I statement and ask how you can work on it together. Another thing that's important is to have boundaries, because it'll be certain personalities that are more easily manipulated than others. For example, if you're a people pleaser or lacking in self-esteem a bit, you're more likely to allow a manipulator to manipulate you. So thinking about, what are my boundaries in terms of how much I want to help other people, or how much I'm prepared to stand up for myself. If you've got boundaries in place and stick to them, you're less likely to be manipulated. Again, stand up for yourself, stand your ground. If you're talking to a manipulator and you're trying to say no, etc., they may distract you with other conversations, or if you challenge them, they may distract you. So stand your ground, make sure that what you want to say is being heard before moving on. From an HR perspective, make sure you take notes or keep emails if this is getting to the borderline bullying stage. So do keep notes of exactly what was said. And finally, do confront them, but do it again in the way that we just talked about for people that you don't know particularly, that you don't get on with particularly well. Being assertive, being empathetic, coaching or SBI or whatever approach suits you. And again, if you're getting yourself into a conflict situation and it's getting aggressive, remove yourself from the conversation. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to say anything more on manipulating people, because some of it does cross over with people that you don't get on with. So does anybody think they now know a manipulator? Yeah, nobody works with somebody who has manipulated them. I'm very surprised at that. Yeah, anybody happy? Helen, are you waving your hand at us?
I'd like to say something.
Yeah?
Yep.
Absolutely, Hannah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, am I the manipulator? Because I like to reward my staff occasionally,
Yeah.
but I also know at the same time it encourages them and it boosts them. That's my agenda. So is that perceived as manipulation?
So when you're saying it improves their performance,
Yeah.
Who or what is getting the benefit of them having an improved performance?
I am.
Anybody else?
They are. Oh.
Well, they are, but because I'm the one that's dealing with clients, I am because I'm essentially the operator.
Yeah.
I find that to keep them motivated, there's a certain age group I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
I will occasionally, and when I say this, I might take them out for lunch, give a thank you, chocolates and stuff. But I just feel this is the world we live in.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you saying, Hannah, there is that you're rewarding them for good performance because you want that performance to continue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Saying.
And the point of that performance is then the whole organisation performs better, they get more job satisfaction.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say you're being manipulative. I would say, though, if it strays into, if you don't do this, you won't get that, or it strays into a constant, I'll treat you badly if you don't perform, then that to me would be more manipulative, because at the moment you're doing it for the good of everybody.
Yeah, so I'm doing it just to keep people motivated, because I understand the way life is. If you do everyday grind of life, I just feel like sometimes it's nice to just say, flatter people, just say, and it's a genuine flattery, but at the same time I know the outcome is to keep them going. So this is the thing.
No, it doesn't sound manipulative to me. Good, thanks, Hannah.
You've never had that. Never had that. Someone said, am I the manipulator?
No, true.
I had she wasn't my boss, but my boss wouldn't do anything about her at a place that I used to work, and so she wasn't a customer, we were sort of equal, but she used to be the team leader and I was a team member of another team that worked in another sort of organisation, and we sort of used to work together. But she would send me really sort of quite nasty and harsh emails, but then copy everybody else in at the same time.
Yeah.
And just one day I just got really annoyed with this, and I just responded back, not aggressively, but sort of said, look, if you're going to copy everybody else in, do you mind not telling me off in these emails? And just left it at that. My boss then took it that I was the one that needed to be disciplined for responding, even though I said many times that this was going on. Anyhow, it got to the point where I said, look, I'm not going to deal with this the way it is, and waited to a point where I felt I was ready to deal with it. And we went out for coffee, because she was very much like, you need to be to my boss, you need to discipline this person, and speaking to a manager of another organisation like that, and all this sort of thing, and I wasn't having any of it. And when we went out for the coffee, she was like, well, what have we come to a coffee shop for? And I was like, well, because this is an environment where it's not work-based, we are in an open forum. You can't smack me. And so I sort of approached it from that way, and I did end up. Pardon? Did
it work?
Well, yeah, because I sort of said, look, the way that you've been speaking to me since I joined the organisation is out of order. I don't work for you, I wouldn't expect my boss to speak to me like that, let alone somebody else. And when I approach you and tell you to stop doing it because my boss won't do anything about it, you're the one then seeking to have me disciplined. What is it that I've done, or what is it that's annoyed you? And apparently, some years before I even started at the organisation, when I was first new into the post, I'd been at a conference and she'd said hello to me. Now, bearing in mind, knowing myself and the way I am in a room full of people that I didn't know, that I had, felt insecure myself about, somebody saying hello to me, if I missed them, it would never have been on purpose, because believe me, I would have enjoyed somebody to talk to at one of these events, so
you'd held on to it all that time.
Yes. And that was what it was. Because I hadn't said hello at a conference, she had got this predetermined view of me, and all that time she tried to manipulate me to do what she wanted and be what she wanted, and I wasn't going to do that, but my boss wasn't going to do anything about it either,
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, so you had that open conversation, maybe in slightly a direct way. But you did have that open conversation, which is good. Sharon, you were sort of nodding your head at that. Is that a similar one?
Yeah, it's. I think this is just a common ground for me. I've had another such email today. So this is the person who is owning a service, and I run the delivery of this particular service. He's not really been engaged throughout his time. He's been busy on other projects, but now he seems to be starting to come back in the fold and challenging quite a lot of the things that I've been doing. When if he's on holiday for 2 weeks, everything runs absolutely fine. And again today, I got another challenging email. I think it's him trying to state his assertiveness on kind of assessing his authority over me, should I say, copying all of my colleagues. And this is a repeat issue. It's not the first time he's done it. And I did reply stating, I don't wish him to copy my colleagues. I want him to reply to me directly in such things, because I find it very undermining. And then I didn't get any acknowledgement back from him at all, other than I didn't answer his replies to the other things that he wanted to know about.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
That's an ongoing one for you, Sharon, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I don't think it's getting any better at the moment, but yeah.
So has anybody had that situation where they're getting emails that are quite aggressive, and has successfully dealt with it at all?
I had an aggressive email last week, and I actually just picked the phone up to the person and spoke with them. And although they were hiding behind emails, it actually got very frustrating, because I didn't have the time or the inclination to detail as much as they wanted me to in an email. Yeah. So I actually phoned them up and had a conversation, and then just put an email afterwards, just, you know, thanking them for their time, and, you know, sort of just explained that I'd taken their points on board, and that I felt that, you know, there was 3 things that came out of the conversation that we both mutually agreed with, and that's actually helped a lot, because I think that person would have continued sending emails about the same thing.
And that's the problem with emails, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can write an email and it comes across to another person in a totally different way to what you anticipated. So, you know, if you're stuck in that sort of email loop and you can have a conversation with people, I think that would definitely be the best approach. It's not always possible, I know, but if you can, trying to open up a dialogue and the other person maybe see where you're coming from as much as the other way around. Yeah. Great. Good. Anybody else got any manipulators to share?
Well, I'm meeting one tomorrow.
Oh, right. Excellent.
So we're going for a walk and talk. Walk and talk. And
coffee think this time it's a walk and talk, right?
Yeah, it's a walk and talk this time. So, and I haven't really seen her manipulative behaviours like to what the things that you said in types of behaviours. But I think the other things that resonated with me is where you said they want everything. They want to succeed at everything. They want to take control of everything. And if they're not in control, they really struggle with that. So, you know, I've seen it in that way more than anything else. And then, you know, she starts overriding. She's underneath me so I'm her business manager. And it's almost like everything I do within my job role, she has to be part of. And if she can't be part of it, she starts copying in everybody. But I think this is for my development. This is for whatever. It gets a bit like she tries to take other people with her, but she has got stopped a little bit, but it's continuous behavior that's affecting us. And I did something that she didn't like me doing, and she gave me feedback, but it went ahead because it was the right thing to do. And it worked really well. And actually, she sent me lots of recognition for it, which is good. But the other side of it is, as a consequence, it led to another activity. She was like, no, I need to be part of that now. Yeah. You know, so it was almost like she has to be part and she has to be succeeding within that. So there's a bit of manipulativeness, because I think she does want my job, you know, and she has said that in a way, but unfortunately I'm not going anywhere, and I've told her that. So I said, unless you kill me, I'm not going anywhere. So yeah, so I think it's almost like tomorrow we're going to have that open dialogue. I think I'm going to start off with that open dialogue, take out the you, and it's more, you know, we're in it together. Our business is our business. You know, let's look at that first, and how can we work with that rather than, you know.
Yeah.
And when taking control, I think that's a problem. It's really trying to bring that back. And I don't think what you said about people pleaser, I like to please my people who I work with. So, you know, I want to have that good working relationship, but I need to hold that boundary.
Yeah.
So I think that boundary stuff is really going to be important for tomorrow. So
Good.
I will be doing that, put that in place.
Yeah, and that's a really common one that people want to control and the situation and the conversations that go on. So to do that, they become manipulative when actually it's driven by an anxiety. An anxiety that if it gets out of my control, then it's all going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be left behind. That's what's driving it. And that's the thing to remember when you have these conversations. Absolutely open it up. But think about where that person is coming from. And I would strongly suggest she's coming from a place of anxiety and low self-worth. So she needs a good coach, I do feel. Actually.
Yes, I do. I think maybe I point to your way.
Could I add to that? I don't know if you guys are familiar with, Joe, I'm sure you will be, FIRO-B, which really is about understanding yourself or an individual, their need for that they want for themselves or to put on other people around affection, inclusion and control. And again, it's part of what we do in our leadership development at Johnson Matthey. I've done it in other organisations as well, but it's quite a handy tool to really understand what somebody needs. And if you can understand the degree of control that individual, you know, is thirsting for or they want, you know, to exert, it just helps you. So the only thing, as you know, you can only control yourself is how you engage, how you talk to other individuals. If they've got a high need for inclusion, to share more information with them sometimes can really make a shift on that individual's behaviours. So we found that a really powerful tool. We've actually had that as again, it's about getting common language because it brings the conversation to the fore as a group and as a team. And I've done that to my whole team as we've gone through the FIRO-B in order that we got that common language. And we understand where each other's coming from and what we need from each other as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Rachel. Good. Okay, well, we've reached 8 o'clock. So if you do need to jump off, do jump off. If there's anything that you wanted to continue talking, I'm happy to stay here a bit longer. But thank you for seeing so many of you here this month. It's really lovely to see all of you and for your contributions. And do enjoy the rest of the week until I speak to you next. Oh, yes,
lovely.
Lots of you.
Rachel.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, what was that last acronym?
FIRO, FIRO-B, FIRO-B. If you Google it, there's lots of stuff on there.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Rachel.
Sorry, Joe, you were saying holidays.
I'll send out an email. It's easy, just about my holidays this summer. Yes. Where I'm going. Lovely to speak to you all.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone. Speak soon. Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Hello. Anybody wanting to carry on talking, or are you all had enough and going for a glass of wine?
I'm going to sort the kids out. So.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Do we need to have a conversation, Miranda, soon about what L&D have said to you?
Yes, I was just about to send you an email. All good to go. They've just said basically send over your invoice and we can set up first session. So
fantastic. Yeah. Oh, I'll wait for your email then. Brilliant. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Speak to you soon. Take care.
Hi, Fiona. I'm glad you stayed on.
That was really good tonight. Really enjoyed that.
Good. Excellent. It's nice having more people, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially all the other ladies, their contribution was very good, especially Rachel.
Yes, but Rachel's very knowledgeable.
Yeah. Now, are you available tomorrow for a call?
Tomorrow, let me see. So I have a 4 o'clock or a 7 o'clock. That's all, I'm afraid.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock. Yeah. Very good. So you've possibly got some money sorted, have you?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant news. Excellent. Okay, well, I look forward to talking to you then.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Bye.
You bye. I forgot to